Okay. I beat ya. It's 1 o'clock. We'll start the meeting for Tuesday, February 4th. Call the meeting to order. Attendance is always the first thing on our agenda, and we have 100% attendance with Councillor Jolly attending virtually. Councillor Jolly, how do the flags look behind us? It looks pretty good, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's busy.
That is a thank you to Mr. Fletcher. We attended a meeting at Michael Cooper's office and they had these frames that hold the flags out. And I just said, I like those. Next thing I know, we have 6 in council chambers. So the flags are on display. And we'll all stand proudly beside the Canadian one, right? Councillor Killick?
Absolutely, and I will wear my Canada Day shirt and hat and tie and pin and pants if I had them on, but I forgot them at home today.
Okay, I need a motion to adopt the agenda as presented. Councillor Mackay, go ahead.
There were some changes to the,
Not to the agenda, no.
all right, good. That the February 4th, 2025 agenda be adopted as presented.
All right, call for the vote. Voting's closed. Passes unanimously. 2 things off the agenda. So we do have one registered speaker to present to us today, Mr. Richard Ridgway. It says on my notes that he was going to attend via Zoom. Is he in our Zoom meeting?
Yes.
All right. Richard, I see you there. Well, I can't see you. You want to turn your camera on?
Sure.
Oh, it might not be working. Oh,
There we go.
there we go. All right, Mr. Ridgway, hopefully our officers explain to you that you have 5 minutes to talk to council, and I'll start that 5 minutes now. Go ahead.
Sure, yeah, if I could here, I'm just gonna share this here and
Okay, we can't
should be able
hear
to get audio from that as well.
So, Mr. Ridgway, we can't hear you, and I've been told it's on your end. Any suggestions, Sean? Well, how we?
You cannot hear me?
Oh, it's just really low.
Really low. Okay, I'll turn it up here. Is that better?
You fixed it. Perfect. Okay.
Okay.
Start your 5 minutes now. Go ahead.
Sure. Just want to share my screen here if I can get the Zoom back up here.
I think we can see it.
Okay, and you're able to see the policy here? Yeah, we are. Okay. So what I'd like to speak about today is the social media policy here. And I was originally going to go on about the moderation policy, particularly the last line, that for any reason are deemed to be inappropriate by a director of a department or executive leadership. And essentially it's saying that for any reason they can remove something off the city's social media. Now, in the last couple of days, this link has subsequently gone dead. Now, the city's Twitter account still links to it, but as you can see here, there's an error, there's no page hosted. Now, accounts are still being blocked based on this policy, which brings me to my next point of what are these sort of moderators actually doing now? Well, they claim that they have turned off the comments on all of the posts. And now there's about 23,000 posts on the Twitter account. All of the old ones are still able to be commented on. And my bigger issue, though, here it says you can direct message the city. Obviously, if you've been blocked, you're unable to direct message the city. You can only use the email contact form. Now, where that's a big problem is the same city Twitter account is encouraging residents to use it for emergency alerts. And unfortunately, when you're blocked, you are unable to get these emergency alerts. And then kind of back to the previous slide, the big contradiction, just an hour and a half ago here today, I was still able to comment on this same post from January 16th. Even though on January 29th, these managers claimed that all posts were turned off, or ability to comment. So why this is very important, I mean, obviously emergency alerts people need to get, but also since January 30th, and at the time of making this yesterday, there was 9 posts on the city Twitter account that were not on the city website. So, I mean, obviously it's a very valuable resource to have access to the city Twitter account. And when we go back to the original reason for blocking, that it's any reason, which quite frankly seems like a violation of free speech, and a policy that's subsequently been removed, I'm not really sure if that's fair, valid, or just. So what I think the city needs to do is, you know, similar to Spruce Grove, as you can see here, very similar to City of Edmonton, establish some clear standards. I mean, they tried to do that, but their answer was any reason, which I don't really think the arbiters of public purse can just sort of decide for anything they see fit to start blocking people. So with that, they're going to have to go and unblock a lot of these accounts, unless, of course, they have very just reasoning for this. And of course, there's spam accounts, there's bot accounts that are flooding stuff. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about actual people trying to engage in a discourse with the city that, you know, the individual department manager might not like, but unfortunately, that's part of their job. And then, of course, once these established standards have come into play, train the employees on how to enforce them. I mean, that's a big part of anything. And I mean, really, so where do we go with this now that we've established the city seems confused as to how they're rolling it out? I've tried to speak with the manager here, Corey. It's not returning my calls. When I did speak to him to discuss how does one get unblocked, what's the process for this, simple answer to me was call legal. Basically, and sort of doesn't matter to me, sue us if you want. Huge liability for the city. I mean, he's been in control of this department, according to his own LinkedIn, for 12 years. So, I mean, fish rots from the head down, as we all know. And then also, there's 8 people in this communications department. I've tried calling most of them. No one answers their phone. Most go directly to voicemail. Not a very good way to communicate.
Mayor, point of order, or privilege rather.
Privilege, yeah.
Can we get this Zoom thing taken off? We don't need to be attacking staff in council meetings.
I mean, I don't think I'm attacking staff. I'm simply explaining
Mayor,
my
you-
experience
Why don't we
with
just
this
go to the
staff
next
member.
slide, Ms.
Oh my
Ridgway?
God.
This
Privilege?
is the last slide.
Okay. So why don't we stop on sharing and I'll let you finish your presentation.
Mayor,
Yeah,
could you
but-
rule my point of privilege first?
It's off the screen now, Councillor Jolly.
There we go. I'll just leave it on here now. I mean, if you guys have any questions, that's all I'd like to say. I mean, I would just like the city to establish a fair, consistent policy and abide by it themselves.
All right, thank you for your presentation. So the way it works when you present to council is you get to speak for 5 minutes and then council has an opportunity to ask you questions if you're open to that. And then we go through all the registered speakers and then the next thing on the agenda is an opportunity to ask our staff any questions related to that. So there may be some questions of council to staff, or is there any questions of Mr. Ridgway actually at this time? Okay, before we go on to the next agenda item, I'll just say, Mr. Ridgway, that, oh, go ahead, Shelley, missed you, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Ridgway. Thanks for presenting today. I just had a question for you. Has this been a new thing that's come up? Have you been blocked prior, or is this a recent occurrence?
Recent as of January 16th. I mean, the policy in question's been enacted for quite a few years from what I can tell. But from my personal experience, yeah, it was just from the last couple of weeks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so what I was about to say is that we have actually a new policy and we can get it clarified from our legal department if you wish, but and honestly, nothing to do with yourself, but some upcoming issues on our agenda, as well as we want to do exactly what you were saying, is have some of those consistent guidelines that will honestly protect our staff when they so they can understand when they can block someone, when they can unblock someone, when they can remove a comment, so they're not doing it arbitrarily. So I agree with you that it should be fair, but I also want to say that when there is foul language on our Facebook page, or when inappropriate or lies are misinformation is being presented, I would like that removed. So that's where we're headed into the future. Social media 10 years ago was an amazing tool for us as a city and as elected officials to engage with the public, but sometimes it turns quite nasty. I have my own personal page that I run that I was banning and removing people from just this very weekend for inappropriateness. So, and I don't even have very good policies. It's hard. I can tell you it's very hard for everyone involved. So our legal department is going to be drafting up a new set of, what do you call it, standards. So I think that's about right, Marta. You don't have to jump in, just nod. Am I right? No, I'm going to clarify this later, but Oh, Councillor Killick, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Just so I'm clear, Mr. Ridgway, that there's a difference between not being able to comment, and that is across the board for everybody. And the city does a lot of social media posts about, you know, everything from Christmas tree pickup to snow clearing to emergency services. So we don't allow comments back on that because that is now a post of information that is just going out to all residents. So is your concern that you're specifically blocked from making comments on Twitter, or is it that Twitter or I'm not sure what other piece of social media there that you particularly are blocked, or that no one can make comments back?
Yeah, so this has sort of evolved since I originally applied to speak to you guys. This policy here, as you can see, was the one that was online and has subsequently been taken offline. And as I understand, you guys are in the process of implementing a new one. But like my block on multiple accounts, as much as yesterday, I had an account that was blocked. And you can still comment on a lot of the posts. Like I have one from 11:30 today, an hour and a half ago. I commented on a post. Now, I understand they're in the process of restricting new posts from being commented, which that's fine. I actually encouraged Corey to do that. And I said that's what the Edmonton Police Twitter account does. But the problem I have is, I mean, my face is on top of it here right now. I can maybe do this and you'll be able to see it. But I'm still blocked from the account. So now I can't follow it. So I can look on the Twitter account and I can read the new posts, but only if I actively go and search it. I don't get an alert from it. I can't follow the account and have it pop up in my feed. And therein lies the problem, right? Is, as I said, since the 29th, there's been 9 posts that are on Twitter that are not on the city website. So there's a lot of information that you can't get unless you're on the Twitter account. And then to arbitrarily block people, I mean, which, okay, we've established we're not going to do that anymore. But now what do we do for all the people who have been blocked?
Thanks for the clarification. I was not clear from the first comments there, whether it was that everyone couldn't comment, or if people were being selectively blocked, and that may help administration when we ask them for questions of clarification. Thanks.
Yeah,
Alright.
just if I could here, just very briefly, you'll see here in the bottom left corner the alert you get now. City of St. Albert has blocked you. You can view public posts from the city, but you are blocked from engaging with them. You cannot follow or message the City of St. Albert.
There you go.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any more questions of our council. Mr. Ridgway, so thank you for joining us. You can resume watching this council meeting on the YouTube channel, and there might be some questions from members of council towards our staff about this issue. So thank you.
guys.
Okay, that is all the presentations that we have that are not associated with further in the agenda items. So that we are now into business arising. Is there any questions for Mr. Ridgway's presentation? Councillor Killick?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to ask administration, I think this is a newly implemented process that we've turned off commenting so that everybody is fair. We've not been selective in doing that. We are posting information to residents, and we are not being selective of blocking people. There are no comments are allowed back on the Facebook posts for information. If people want to contact the city for further information, there is the link or email account that it allows feedback that way. And so we are treating, as far as I understood from our new policy, everybody fairly and the same. We're not being selective, but it seems like there may have been something happening here that, you know, they're blocked for comments on Facebook, but not on Twitter. I wonder if after Mr. Ridgway's clarification, administration could clarify exactly what's happening there.
Yeah, thank you, Council. I'll start, and certainly communications and public affairs can delve in. Bottom line is Mr. Widget is absolutely correct, right? This is a recent decision, not related specifically to his case by any stretch of the imagination. But the decision has been made based on resourcing, right? Based on relative standardization and frankly, just keeping discourse civil, to remove all comments across our social media feeds. You are 100% correct that the traditional lines or points of entry into the city in terms of communicating, whether it's a specific issue or generally, remain. But the commentary related to our social media posts holistically moving forward will be turned off. And so that will apply to everybody. Right. There is still the legacy issue, being able to comment on legacy posts. We'll have to work through that. To his concern in terms of the notifications, in particular, the emergency management, that is a fair and valid concern. And with no ability to comment going forward, conceptually, we should be able to unblock everybody so that they would be able to receive those, because they can't provide comments anyway, but that's being worked through. So absolutely, this is being applied, I think, equitably across the board.
Okay, thank you. It sounds like we have some work in progress, as any big IT project and change across social media platforms. It'll take a little while to iron out some of the wrinkles, and I think that sounds good to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Bermansky, go ahead.
Thank you, through the mayor to administration. My question is, when someone's trying to get a hold of someone in communications at the city, what's the normal turnaround time, and are they being replied to by email? Is there a specific, if all the names are there, I'm sure, the public's not, connecting to everyone that's there. So what's the correct procedure that someone can follow to get the quickest response?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I see Paul Pearson, our Director of Communications Public Affairs, so perhaps I'll defer to him.
Thank you, Mr. Fletcher. Through the chair to Councillor Bermansky. We respond within 1 business day at the absolute latest for folks who call and leave a voicemail, or if they send an email, or if they direct message any of our social media accounts. All of those things are still monitored, and we respond very, very quickly. As you know, communications moves quickly, and we try to stay on top of everything as diligently as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Jolly.
Thank you. My first question, and this is not specifically about the presenter, but I'm curious about what the bar would be to have someone blocked from our social media accounts. Like, what kind of criteria would we have?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Mr. Pearson, do you want to take a first discussion at that, and then we can support out of legal?
Sure, certainly. Thanks, Mr. Fletcher. Through the chair to Councillor Jolly. We do have the code of conduct posted on our website, and it does state some general guidelines. We don't allow foul language. You're not allowed to sell things on city channels. We also don't tolerate any racism or discrimination or hate speech. Those are the big broad categories that are outlined on our online, and that's how we operate. And for the record, we actually don't do a lot of removing of comments or blocking, or haven't in the past, but we're starting to see much more of that as we've indicated.
Okay, thank you. And then I guess my follow-up question is, do we have a bar where, we wouldn't respond to messages from members of the public? I know in the mayor's office, we do have criteria where we just don't respond, and I'm wondering how that works with the city.
Thank you, Councillor Jolly, through the chair. It's the same general bar. Once we have answered questions, and if we are experiencing any sorts of abuse or inappropriate language, or where we have answered the questions repeatedly and sufficiently, we do make that judgment call. But again, not something that happens very often.
Great, thanks so much.
Is this I don't know who can answer this. Is this a trend that other municipalities are following?
Generally, I think if you were to look at a cross section, you'd probably see sort of different stages of maturity across the map. But yes, we are not leading the charge on this by any stretch of the imagination. Other municipalities have taken a similar approach.
As I said, I couldn't even keep up with the comments on some I posted in the last couple weeks. 20,000 views in the comments just got out of control. So you just sometimes have to stop it because you can't monitor it. And if you don't monitor it, then you're responsible for what's said. So, okay. Moving on. Consent agenda, before we read it in, I will let the public know because it wasn't part of the package that 8.1, which was Arts Development Advisory Committee's recommendation on the decessation of Saturday at the market, as well as 8.2, which is the appointment to the Community Service Advisory Committee. We added them to consent because we normally have committee business on consent, and that was just missed. So as long as no council member has an objection to that, then I will get someone to read it into the record. Councillor Killick, go ahead.
On consent, that special strategic planning meeting minutes of January 13th to 14th, 2025, and the regular council meeting minutes of January 21st, 2025. That's item 6.1. Item 8.1, Arts Development Advisory Committee, and agenda item 8.2, appointment to the Community Service Advisory Committee on consent.
All right, I'll call for the vote. Voting's closed. And those pass unanimously. So I do know that Emily Baker is on the Zoom meeting. So Emily, we just passed the Arts Committee recommendation. So if you want to stick around, you can, but you don't have to. But thank you for coming. All right, and then, so we just passed the minutes from our special strategic planning session of January 13th and 14th, as well as our regular council meeting of January 21st on consent. And then the next thing is a committee business, which we could have put on consent, but I think Councillor Hughes wants to make a presentation, so I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you. Every other committee doesn't go on consent, so I don't know why this would be on consent.
Committee business generally is, unless they're presenting, and you're the chair, so you can.
Yeah.
present, yeah.
Okay, so thank you for that. Actually, I think this is an important presentation because this is the first update that council's ever received about what the status is of the Internal Audit Committee. And it's been a long time in the progress. So, okay, we have the first slide up. Perfect. Thank you, Daria. So while it says 2023, 2024, in reality, this is a 2015 to 2024 update. And the beginning of this actually began in 2010 with a discussion from a former councillor who suggested we have an internal audit steering committee, which was met by a lot of resistance to the point where people thought that it was illegal to have this committee, which is clearly not the case. And in 2015, it was finally moved forward. So if you want to go to the next slide, Daria. And I will go to my next slide too.
That screen's not on. Is that on purpose?
I don't know why. So in 2015, it was approved. I think it was 2015. It might have been
It's a
20.
real pain for me to turn my head.
Yeah, thank you. I was
Thank you,
wondering about that
Swan.
earlier too. Around 2015, it was approved, but there was no bylaw that followed it. And finally, in 2017, with a change of leadership, we developed the bylaw for the Internal Audit Steering Committee. And then in 2019, it began having actual audits completed. So it was a very slow progress from the beginning to our first audit was over 4 years. So the progress we have here is it was established for the bylaw finally in 2017. And there was therefore some kind of parameters around the committee. And then since that time, they with that, they did the procurement audit, the risk management, and the fiscal and operational review under that previous bylaw. Following that, we had a review of the entire bylaw and the intentions of the committee, and we began additional projects after 2022. So if you go to the next slide, The intention of the Internal Audit Committee has developed to have, what we've accomplished is that we have now a decision of which audits we're doing based on risk. So it's we developed a corporate risk register, and with that, we're able to determine not based on how poorly or well we're doing it, but based on whether or not something were to go wrong, what would be the risk of a catastrophe happening, to try to mitigate the highest risk down to the lowest risk in the organization. And so that's, we developed the corporate register. We also in 2022 developed a bylaw that helped us more clearly define what the mandate is, our roles and responsibilities, and the structure of the committees. So we actually have a rationale for each one of the meetings and when they occur. So for example, we have to meet in the first quarter of the year, and then that will help us determine the work plan for the rest of that year and approve the work plan moving forward for the next 3 years. We've also developed a multi-year plan. So we don't just know what this one is. We've also agreed to the next 2 potential work audits that's going to be happening. So this committee will be meeting in March of this year. And the intention will be to be not only recognizing what's happening this year, but also moving forward with, assuming that there's the funding, additional audits to be happening in the future. This allows there's to be structure to happen. And in addition, it also allows the staff to have a heads up that, there's an audit coming in a year or 2 years' time, so that they can prepare their workload to accommodate it as well. And then in addition, we have the processes, which we've aligned to our business planning, and we've used tools and templates to make sure that things are moving forward. So if we go to what we have completed in 2019, there was the procurement audit that was brought forward at the suggestion of administration, and it was completed around the 2020-ish, actually around 2019, it actually still finished. That was actually fundamental in the timing, because the procurement is this little department that no one thinks about till you desperately need to buy something. And it was not online. And in 2020, as we all remember, everything got shut down. So even the changes that were implemented that time and during that time allowed this department to be able to function and to be able to have the city move forward in different types of developments and purchases that wouldn't have happened if everything had to be done on paper. So just the timing of that audit happened to work out significantly to help the organization in what would have been a really strong crisis in that area. Since that time, we've also, after that, all the rest of that funding that happened went into the operational review that was the whole organizational operational review, but all other internal audits came to a halt, which then brought us to this council's term. And I just want to thank everyone in this council for approving the funding to keeping this moving forward. Because really up to that point, we'd finished 1 internal audit, 1 operational review, and the value of the audits had yet to really be proven to this organization. And I know that up to that point, especially, there was a lot of hesitancy. Staff really weren't sure what they were going to be getting involved in if they did an audit. Was it going to be a blame game? How were they going to move forward on this? It could have been a very negative experience. However, I think that since 2019 and up to this point, it's been proven that that's not the intention of the audits. The audits are just to do a health check on how our processes, our procedures, anything else that needs to be implemented to improve and strengthen the organization. But it's not there to put fingers or to make it a negative experience, but to work collaboratively with staff. So because this council approved additional funding, and so thank you again for doing that, we were able to move forward additional audits. And so from there, through discussions, we agreed to do a risk management audit to figure out what the risks were and not just have administration go, maybe look at this one. We had an outside consultant come forward and say, this is what we'd recommend from a risk perspective of how I would do the audits. And that's what came forward with that. From that, which also gave us not only a first one, but multiple layers of risk that can then be brought forward in processes and updated. And from that, they said the highest risk would be cybersecurity, not because we have an issue with cybersecurity, but because if there are issues, it could be catastrophic to organization. How strong is the fort around our organization? And that was the first one they said we should do, which is what we then accomplished. So if we go to the next slide. So what we did from there is we did, let me just see here. Yeah, we did the cybersecurity, and what we're currently working on is the next slide, which is the resource planning model, which will be with human resources, and it will help us figure out how we're allocating our human resources, if we're doing it through casual, for permanent, for full-time, how we're meeting those, whether or not this is the best plan and if it needs to be improved. And so this is again, just feedback to help strengthen the Human Resources Department as they do their planning and their requests, especially at budget time. Moving forward in 2026, the intention, and this will be approved by assuming it's approved by the audit committee in March, it will be the managing infrastructure, which we've been discussing this with life cycles and trying to figure out what we're going to do, all these various pipes and roads, et cetera. And this will be an analysis about if what we're doing is everything we need to be doing or whether or not we need to be improving on that, which will significantly strengthen, I'm hoping, as we move forward and try to handle all of the assets that we have. And then the final one in 2027 that's being approved at this point would be for the review of digital transformation strategy. So the difference between that is the cybersecurity is, if you imagine that we're a city, right? And we have a fort. We are a city, but we have a fort. And this is cybersecurity's protection of the city fort. The digital transformation strategy is how do we manage inside that city to use digital technology to best enable our staff, best enable the user experience, and to strengthen the organization. So there's a lot involved in that because we have so many different components and different systems and different programs, and we're such a diversified organization that trying to figure out how we can merge that so that there's as few different components talking to each other and that we actually are able to meld properly moving forward. That's what that one in 2027 will do. So it's really recognizing the fact that the digital transformation is happening and that we need to be making sure that we're on top of it. So those are the ones moving forward.
Could I ask a question, Councillor Hughes?
Yeah.
We'll get to the end of the presentation.
Yeah, I'm almost done. So, yeah, so this is the last major slide. I wanted to acknowledge to Daria and to Mr. Fletcher for actually making this move forward the way it has. This committee has only moved forward because administration has said, you know what, we're going to do this. When administration pushed back, it did not move forward, and I can see the difference in that. And so, Daria, the amount of work that you've said, I'm going to do the best job I can. And working with staff has been phenomenal to make sure that this has been successful. And Mr. Fletcher, you have recognized and gone through it in your previous career, recognizing the value of this. And I just want to thank you both for actually making this become the successful committee that it has. And I want to thank as well all of the council, other committee members, both current and previous, but especially Councillor Mackay and Councillor West from Bradhead, who as fellow councillors on this committee have really recognized the value that we've been putting forward and recognizing that this is ultimately going to be a positive experience for the organization. I kind of liken this to weightlifting. You don't really want to lift weights. You don't go and say, I'm looking forward to my 5th rep, but when you come out of it, you're stronger. And so this is just a way for us to do this, make this stronger, but it's only because the committee members and administration have recognized the value and then moved forward to make this where we are today, because it was very possible that this committee update would have never occurred. It wouldn't have occurred had we not got the funding both times in last term and this term. And it would not have moved forward if we hadn't had the dedication of the people to say, you know what, we're going to push this forward and recognize that we can do a lot to improve our organization. So with that, I can take any questions, but I'm just very, very grateful that we can actually move this forward and show what we are both have accomplished. Because the human resources will be finished this year. Cybersecurity, there'll be a plan moving forward to make us even stronger than what we are now. And where we potentially could be going. And so this is I feel like this was dragging a ball up a mountain, but we've actually gotten over the other side now. And now we're actually starting to gain some steam. And the legacy from this organization or from this council to this organization, from what we agreed to do with just that simple agreeing to that funding 4 years ago or 3.5 years ago, is going to last for decades. So that's it. Thank you.
Councillor Killick.
Thank you for the great work on the audit committee, Councillor Hughes and the rest of administration. My question and Councillor Mackay, for sure. Goes without saying. Question is that for the implementation of the IT strategy, which is a big piece of it and becoming more and more important these days, IT security, is there a budget ask that goes along with that in 2025 for 26, or is that already planned in, or where are we at on the budget to do that work?
I can answer that if you guys want. But from what I understand is they're still developing the plan. They're planning to bring that forward to the committee this in the Q1. And then from there, they will be coming forward and asking if there's any funding requirements. So because they just received the plan, I think it was like October. So now it's now digesting it and then figuring out what to move forward. One of the benefits of the audits is it gives you a bit of a framework of saying, this is where you're at, and this is where we think would be good for investment and where we think you should go. But now it's about administration figuring out how they're going to be able to implement it. And it will take some time. I mean, it took several years to implement the procurement, but it's coming forward.
Perfect. Thank you.
Anything else?
All right, I see no more questions. Councillor Hughes, do you want to make the motion?
I don't think there is a motion. I think it's just information.
For information, sorry.
Yeah, but thank you, everybody, for your time and attention on this.
Perfect. Okay, I know online, let me just check. Do we have Suzanne here? I thought, yeah. So we have a annual report from the Seniors Advisory Committee is agenda item 7.2. We have the chair, Suzanne Clemens, here to present. So Suzanne, go ahead when you're ready.
Yes, can you hear me?
We sure can. Yep.
Okay, it looks like I don't have access to my video. It looks like the host has stopped it. If I could get my video. Here we go. Let me just start it, please. Thank you. Okay. Good. You can see me and you can hear me. Excellent. So first of all, thank you, Your Worship and Member of Council, for giving us the opportunity to showcase the Seniors Advisory Committee. I'm here to represent all of the great work we did in 2024. Now, the committee itself, we only met 4 times a year last year. That was in January, March, October, and November. But in addition to that, the committee was very engaged last year in community initiatives, which I will cover. So in 2024, we had 4 objectives. One was to engage around the promotion of volunteerism in St. Albert, which we achieved. The other one was having the opportunity to advise about the downtown area redevelopment plan, which we participated in. And then, of course, providing the community social needs assessment. Again, SAC was involved in that. And then, of course, really importantly and very dear to many of our members' hearts is the launching of the Seniors Elder Service Award program. And lots of great work was done in this area, along with administration, in the sense of how do we get it out to community? What is the right means? What does the communication messages look like? So we spent an actual whole meeting more or less talking about that, along with a lot of other agenda items. So we have a couple very engaged SAC members who are involved in the larger community. We actually sit at the St. Albert Housing Coalition as well as the Older Adult Working Group. And so both these community groups allow SAC to build relationships with organizations providing services to older adults and seniors in the community. And really, really importantly, these roles help us have a better understanding of existing initiatives within St. Albert. What is community actually doing? And so they're coming back to our committees and sharing that information. We know our seniors are struggling in many different areas, from housing to accessibility to food security to fraud. And of course, we know there's scams out there targeting our seniors, and socialization, loneliness, and mental health concerns. So this information is critical and very important to us so that we can stay on top of what is our seniors currently going through. So again, we had lots of activity, including in October, we participated in the mental health first aid session here at the St. Albert Seniors Association. There were several committee members who spent 2 days learning of how can we help a senior who is struggling perhaps in the mental area. What community support services are currently available here in the city of St. Albert? We had information sessions on fraud and scam, just giving members at the committee a higher level of education around this very important and serious crimes against seniors. As well, SAC members provided feedback on the online survey for the Metro Regional Transit. We welcome welcome anytime we have the opportunity to provide our feedback. And in June, one of our members actually participated in the engagement of the 10-year mobility choice strategy in June. So you can see there's a lot of activity. When you think about it, we were only together as a group 4 times, but we've made a difference. Now, we look to the future in 2025. We have some goals in front of us I want to quickly share. Is this committee is looking at the continuation of promoting the Elder Seniors Award Program. We're excited to see what type of nominees get in front of us. As well, we want to provide input on the community vision and pillar sustainability. We're going to take a look at our Seniors Advisory Committee bylaws. Want to see if it's still up to date. Is there any changes that need to take place? And we want to continue the pathway around understanding our seniors and seniors issues. So we're going to continue to be engaged in community groups. We want to look at educational sessions and reviewing statistical data. So anytime council comes to us and asks our opinions, we come from a place of knowing. And that's incredibly important. So in closing of my report, I do want to do a huge thanks to the hard work of your administration team. What a pleasure as a community member to work with highly skilled people such as Tricia, Emily, and Renee. To provide that level of support is commendable. And then very lastly, I'd be very, very remiss if I didn't do a shout out to Councillor Sheena Hughes for her guidance, her patience, helping us understand the nuances of motion. Simple things like that is quite new to some of us. And of course, the expertise that she brings representing you and all of the great work our city council is doing. So on that note, that is my report. I have a 10-page report that I put together. So I hope you have access to it. If you need any more information, let me know. And then lastly, I do want to do, I'm not leaving, but I am stepping down as the chair, but we have a new chair. I'm excited about her role and her contribution to SAC in 2025, and her name is Sharon Brown. So thank you, council. That is my report for 2024.
That's just excellent. Thank you so much, Suzanne. And you had a bunch of thank yous for staff and our council representative, but we need to also thank you. Not only you volunteering, but stepping up as chair and coming today to present, et cetera. It does take time, but that's what St. Albert's all about, volunteerism. So thank you.
Absolutely.
I have a question from Councillor Hughes.
Not just a question. I just want a statement. I just want to thank you, Suzanne.
I'm going to actually go to you for the motion. So
There's no motion.
Oh, right. We're just, this is
That's
just,
why I'm like, I'm just going to tell her
Yeah.
next. There's no motion.
so, okay. If there's no more questions, I'll let Councillor Hughes,
Yeah.
your comments.
Thank you. I just want to thank you, Suzanne, for your dedication to this. You've been extremely positive as you've moved forward as a chair last year. And just to note that she willingly handed over the reins because she just wanted to share the wealth of being a chair to someone else on the committee. But you did a splendid job. And if you ever chose to go back to doing chair, I'd highly recommend you. And just to
thank
thank
you.
you again for your dedication to this committee. It's been very noted and it's definitely helped move a lot of items forward. And I don't think that a lot of people realize how much the seniors committee has actually contributed in the past year. So thank you for all your work.
Thank you, Councillor.
And I do see no more questions and no more hands up. So thank you for joining us today, Suzanne. And
Thank you,
for sticking
everyone.
around. You
Take
can
care.
mention it, Chair.
Thank you, everyone.
And we also have our Youth Advisory Committee with us today to do their 2024 annual report. And I heard Sage is in person, which is always nice to see. So Sage Yakimchuk, she is the lucky girl to chair our Youth Advisory Committee. So take it away whenever you're ready, Sage. Oh, is the mic on? Okay, that's good. Go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Your Worship and Council. I had the utmost privilege of being the 2024 chair. Throughout the past year, the committee has continued to grow in dedication and innovation while serving the youth of St. Albert. I had seen the committee members grow in their critical thinking skills, using their passion for our community to bring about change. I'm immensely proud and honored to be a part of this group. One of our primary accomplishments in 2024 was the implementation of our newly revised St. Albert Youth Advisory Committee bylaw. As this bylaw serves as the foundation of our committee's purpose, we are excited about the change this brings. Through the bylaw amendments, we have been discussing how we can implement more opportunities that promote youth involvement in the community. In response to this, our main priority for Q1 was debating the role of volunteerism with youth and the committee regarding the volunteer opportunity initiatives and/or programs motion from the previous year. A highlighted project of youth community involvement includes the Road Safety Initiative, where a subcommittee applied for a grant through Parachute and were tasked with promoting safe driving to youth in the community. This included researching seatbelt safety measures and interviewing multiple families and individuals who have been impacted by vehicle collisions. This project was left at a standstill due to the subcommittee members resigning. However, we are eager to undertake similar projects in the future. Additionally, we have been growing our social media webpage in order to further reach and promote St. Albert Youth initiatives. We strive to promote opportunities available to St. Albert Youth to become more involved, specifically by promoting city events and programming on our social media, as well as advocating and raising awareness on issues affecting youth. In Q2, YAC was invited to a forum for youth leadership with other youth advisory committees in the greater Edmonton area. We discussed ways youth can pioneer action towards issues that are critical for our community. Based off the success of this event, we have made it a strategic priority to host and facilitate a similar event in St. Albert for youth to gather and learn about topics like these. In Q4, the committee discussed and proposed a motion to have YAC's annual intake match the school year, which we were delighted to hear it passed unanimously. The Youth Advisory Committee has additionally seen increased education in municipal governments and policymaking, gaining a greater insight into how our city runs. The committee holds us to a high regard and will continue to learn more about how city governance operates. Ultimately, I see a very bright future for the St. Albert Youth Advisory Committee, and I anticipate great opportunities for us in 2025. Thank you.
Amazing, Sage, standing in front of a microphone in front of your city council is probably scary for many people, but you did amazing. I could not have done that at your age. The one thing I think we always talk about at council is trying to get more youth excited to be on that particular committee. So any advice? I mean, I know Councillor Jolly is your council rep and you can talk to her anytime, but you're in front of us. So any advice that you have for us to try to get a more applicants and more diversity in the applicants?
Our committee always says to go into the schools, like go and talk to the youth and be active and make opportunities for them that are flexible around their schedules. Like a lot of times youth are either working or they're in school. Obviously they're in school. I would hope so. But we have all these other outside commitments as well, but also kind of looking at it as not just, oh, it's a city governance sort of thing, and focusing more so on it's volunteering. It's also a community. It's also an educational space. It's also a really great networking opportunity. So I think just kind of getting the perspectives on youth when you're advertising these things, when you're going out and you're actually talking with the youth, instead of just thinking about what they might want to hear, actually ask them.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And I always joke, but I'm somewhat serious that Councillor Mackay started off on an advisory committee. Now he sits on council. Councillor Jolly started off on an advisory committee. She's now on council. So did I, and so did Councillor Broadhead. It is a path to another future if you were thinking about it. What school do you go
To
to?
be clear, though, it wasn't the youth committee that.
What school do you go to?
I graduated from St. Albert Catholic High School,
excellent.
and now I'm in my second year of university at the U of A. I started in psychology last year and I just transferred into nursing. Good
for you. That's awesome. Any questions for Sage? Councillor Jolly, any comments? Because you are our council rep there.
Yeah, I'll just echo some of Sage's comments. This is a group that is so motivated to learn and so interested in kind of creating a really safe space. It's unlike kind of any other committee that I've sat with, which is really exciting to see kind of how young people create those safe spaces. I also want to kind of give a shout out to Shannon Pillar. So she's our administrative liaison. She is absolutely fantastic at encouraging this group to provide feedback. She's telling them about other opportunities in the community. So it's really great to have her around that table. And yeah, I'm delighted that I've got a few more months sitting with this group.
Awesome. And we are quite excited too to see if matching the intake period to your school year does maybe change the dynamics of who's applying, and we'll see what happens. And we have two people representing the public school board here today. I'm sure they're taking notes. How can we promote youth committee? All right, thank you very much, Sage.
Thank you so much.
Okay. We are on to, I'm just gonna read the ones that we did on consent, so they don't get forgotten about. So we took a recommendation from the Arts Development Advisory Committee that said that 6,000 be pulled from the Public Art Lifecycle Maintenance Fund for the removal and destruction of Saturday at the Market, 183 PA from 21 Parent Street. This includes the repair of the wall to its original state. I mean, that was approved on consent, but I just need to say that that was an amazing piece of public art that decorated our downtown for many years, and I understand why, but it is very sad to see it go. And then the other one on consent was 8.2 was the appointment to the Community Service Advisory Committee. So Emily Nielsen will be appointed as a member of the Community Service Advisory Committee for a term beginning February 4th, so that's today, and ending December 31st of this year. And that was due to a vacancy. So honestly, Emily, if you're watching or in a letter to you, just thank you for stepping up and help filling that void. And again, path to council. All right, we are now on to bylaw 16, 2024, the Northeast St. Albert Area Structure Plan. We've already done first reading, we've already done a public hearing, and we've already referred it to the EMRB. So today is just second and third reading, but I do believe Mr. Walker, here he comes, has a short presentation just to kind of bring us up to date on development since the public hearing, and refresh our memory. So go ahead, Craig.
Thank you, Mayor. Probably take about a minute just to get set up and share the screen. if that's-
Sorry,
Yeah.
rushing everybody. Everybody take 5 minutes to stretch.
Do you want to just meet at 2 o'clock even, Mayor? Just so that we.
Or 2 o'clock. Although Craig will probably be ready in 30 seconds, but we can take till 2. Everyone's back in the chairs. Councillor Jolly's here, so we're good to go whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. Good afternoon, members of council. Again, for the recording, my name is Craig Walker from Planning. So my presentation today is quite brief and includes, first of all, a quick recap of the November the 5th council meeting, at which point the Northeast ASP first came before you for direction. I'll then discuss the subsequent referral, which occurred to the Edmonton Metropolitan Region Board as per procedure at the time. And then we'll wrap up with potential council motions for your consideration today. So as everyone here is aware, back on November the 5th, a public hearing was held in relation to the Northeast ASP. At that time, administration provided an overview of the proposal and input was received from the applicant and various members of the public. Ultimately, you'll recall that although administration raised concerns, our recommendation wasn't about no, never, but rather it was about not just yet. Upon closure of the public hearing, council gave first reading as well as direction to refer the application to the EMRB. So that referral occurred. And on December the 4th, the EMRB's third-party consultant completed its independent review as per procedure. That's contained in attachment 2, concluding that the EMRB should not support the Northeast ASP. The rationale provided by the consultant is congruent with that outlined by city administration previously. Be that as it may, on December the 10th, the EMRB's administration recommended that the Northeast ASP be approved. As shown in attachment 3, the EMRB administration added within their letter that their review focused on alignment between the ASP and the EMRB's growth plans, principles, and policies. So the EMRB admin, they don't spend much, if any, time reviewing alignment to MDPs, which is mostly just a local matter. Again, that letter is contained in attachment number 3. So the way things work at the EMRB, once administration makes its decision, it starts a 25-day clock for an intermunicipal appeal, which in this case ended on January the 7th with no such appeal being submitted. So that means the ball is now back in the city's court to make a final decision. City administration remains non-supportive, and accordingly, the recommended motion is unchanged and reads that the proposed ASP should be defeated. Alternatively, motions are also drafted should council desire to pursue both second and third readings today. Doing so would approve the ASP, and as a result, it would enable the applicant to submit their neighborhood plan applications for subsequent reviews and decision-making at the administration level. That concludes my overview. Thank you, City Council. Back to you, Mayor Herron.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Walker. We can ask questions, obviously, because I'm not going to ask council to vote until they're comfortable. And then Councillor Killick has already approached me asking to make an initial motion, so I'll go to him when questions are exhausted. So how about we go to you, Councillor Jolly, first?
Thanks. Yeah, just my first question. So I just want to confirm it would be about $800,000 to update the MDP to kind of account for that. Is that right?
That's what we have it initially looked at. There are varying different costs, perhaps some different scales, but as a general rule, this would be a big amendment. So we would expect the cost to be in the order of about $800,000, which would also include some updates to the area structure plan too.
Okay, thank you. And how would that impact the workload of the planning department in particular, or legal? I know they're flat out.
So we do have a council report coming back in a few weeks detailing this, but we would have to reprioritize some of our projects. We would also, within that budget, there would be additional funds for staffing.
Okay, thank you. My next question has to do with the school sites. So kind of we heard from the school boards that the sites in the plan are too small for what they need. So what would be the process to get this updated and the kind of costs associated with that?
Thank you through the chair to Councillor Jolly. I can handle that one. So I've been working very closely with the school boards throughout this process, and I can clarify that all of the under the new two-tier area structure plan and neighborhood plan terms of reference, you do get into more details as the neighborhood planning stage progresses. So for example, right now, there is fine print on all of the maps advising that the school sites are conceptual in terms of their location, their size, their shape. So when you get to the neighborhood plan stage, when all parties involved have a bit more information as emerging community needs become available, we have the opportunity at the administration level, in collaboration with the school boards without coming back to city council, to sort of massage those school sites to make them fit. So whether it's a high school, an elementary, a K-6, a K-9, we have that flexibility under the two-tier terms of reference to shift it a bit to the left or the right, or to squish it or stretch it, et cetera, as needed. So any of those school sites really could be scaled upwards or downwards as necessary, but that they are not meant to be set in stone in terms of any particular size at this point. That would be a neighborhood planning consideration.
And perhaps you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think the two mechanisms to do that, right? We're still constrained, I guess, by the 10% municipal reserve, right? So any maneuver spaces within that 10%, but nothing also precludes the developer from allocating from their own additional lands, right, to bolster that. So those are the mechanisms by which that can happen. Is that fair?
Mayor, if I could just,
Go
if I could just add to that, through the ASP terms of reference, we do have minimum standards for our site sizes. So they're at a minimum, we are creating school park sites that we know generally will fit the K-9 type of alignment of schools.
Thank you. I guess follow up to that, talking about that 10% MR. So if one of those school sites, doubled in size, that just means that it would eat up kind of the whole MR from that area. Is that right? Unless the developer were to donate land.
Through you, Mayor Herron, yes, that's correct. There's actually for this area structure plan based upon the annexation areas, the actual MR dedication is less than 10% because some of it has been taken through Sturgeon County subdivision processes. So we are limited with the amount of municipal reserve in this area. So there are some constraints. The developer could donate, the city could purchase, or the public school board could purchase service land as well if necessary. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. I know the city is not interested in purchasing additional lands, but from what I understand anyways, have we heard anything from any of the school boards or the developers about kind of those other options? Like, is that something that they're contemplating?
Not at this stage, I don't think. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of heads getting shaken. Yeah.
No, we've not heard that at this time.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have, Mayor.
So can you say, so there was previous subdivisions when the land was part of Sturgeon County? And so some of the MR was
already taken by Sturgeon County back in through their processes. And that would have been through the annexation. When we looked at the level of compensation, that would have been incorporated as part of the compensation agreement.
okay.
So when we
So
were
Sturgeon
determining
County
the level
didn't-
of compensation.
Did Sturgeon County receive land or did they receive cash in lieu of MR?
They mostly took cash in lieu. There is one portion that they did take it as land, and so that is now municipal reserve within our boundaries.
Okay, but if they had taken cash, we wouldn't.
Yeah, we wouldn't get the cash back from them,
Obviously,
right?
or the land.
Right.
The 10%, yeah.
Yeah.
Councillor McKay.
Quick follow-up in relation to question that was just asked by Councillor Jolly then. You were indicating that potentially there'd be an impact in relation to staffing and you referred to something coming back. Is that related to the December 3rd council motion in relation to developing a project charter around the organizational impact around kind of what the MDP would do by changing a few things? Is that what you were referring to?
That's what I'm referring to. Thank you.
And that's coming back to council in a sense?
It is.
Okay, thanks for the presentation, Mr. Walker. When you presented back in November, you identified, or administration identified, to be fair, that there was a number of kind of, if this goes ahead, there was impacts in addition to the MDP maybe being altered. What, are there any other indicate or bigger impacts to administration if this does go forward? That weren't, that you didn't, can you rehash some of those concerns that administration has if this does go forward?
Through the chair to Councillor Mackay, I can take a stab at it and I'll ask my colleagues perhaps to supplement. But I think back on November the 5th, we highlighted to the best of our ability that within the pre-annexation boundary, based on historical growth rates, there was enough greenfield as well as infill lands available to accommodate an estimated 20 to 30 years, depends on the growth rate. Could be a bit faster, could be a bit slower. So that was one of our points. For that reason, and due to the availability of infrastructure and other council decisions, a decision was made to prioritize the west, which, by the way, is within those pre-annexation boundaries. Alternatively, going into the northeast would necessitate some kind of remedy to address the servicing capacity. That's currently estimated in the $75 million ballpark. Ultimately, that was the big ticket item. Arguably though, even should such a solution be available, it still impacts the land absorption rate for existing areas. So it could have a number of unknown ramifications on the city's infrastructure and cost recovery for St. Albert West and infill. Obviously, if you're growing in two areas simultaneously, there's impacts on a number of operational fronts, city's assessment and taxation, and those were some of the key things we attempted to communicate back on November the 5th. Colleagues, anything to supplement?
I thought you did a great job. And this probably isn't directed to you, maybe to you, Mr. Fletcher, in relation to identified servicing costs. We're certainly kind of that Damocles sword that's kind of hanging over us is in the decision back in November, and there was a lot of unknowns, so we kind of held back in relation to that. Is servicing costs still a kind of a unknown, or is there, maybe this is not a fair question at this particular time? I don't know. You can answer it or not.
Well, yeah, at the risk, I don't want to introduce any new information, obviously, at this stage, but I think the broad-based long-term permanent solution to the Northeast Basin writ large is right now at about $74 million, including the contingency. So that's a concern insofar as prioritization of borrowing over time for council to consider. There are other costs internal to that, but not really germane necessarily to the ASPs, but more holistically to the Northeast.
Thank you. So without getting into details, because I agree that we shouldn't get into details, but there is some ongoing work going on in relation to maybe coming up with some other.
There have been discussions certainly with the development community and the experts here in the city about what that could look like. Yes.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I just wanted to put that on the record. I guess the comment in relation to no, the ultimate no, but not, I think what you just said in your presentation, just not yet, right? Not. So I guess, do you guys have any idea when then? Is that based on when we get the West completely developed that we'd move, or how do you interpret when that kind of gate will open that would allow development?
Through the mayor, I'll attempt to answer that question, and then maybe look at my colleagues as well. One of the things that we're looking at is absorption rate of residential and non-residential lands. That would be part of it. If we experience a higher than normal growth rate, we would expect that we would need to bring on these lands in a faster time frame. We also want to make sure that the lands are available in a time frame that the servicing is already there. We don't want to wait too long for it either. There is a good balancing act. So we do monitor that annually to understand how much absorbed land we have and do not have. Don't have those stats on me right now, but that is one of the things that we look at. The other component, because of the costs with borrowing, and I don't know, I don't want to go too far with some of this information at this stage, but so if I'm going too far, Marta, please stop me. We would be looking at is bringing on Lakeview, and the opportunities that Lakeview present can also help with some of the financial implications, so that you're not needing as much, say, taxpayer funds or stressing the borrowing limit, so that once those get developed and brought on, that you can look at adding additional areas as well.
So no time limit, more if these things happen, then
Yes,
look at.
so right now we have approximately about 28 years worth of residential land supply. And we've got now with Lakeview brought on, we're somewhere in the same order for non-residential lands. So when we're looking at the absorption, we would expect it to take about 20 years to get through the majority of that absorption, but we also would want to have the lands ready in advance of that 20 years. You don't want to have a delay. So somewhere in the order of 10 years is where we would probably start looking at it based upon our current growth rates.
Thanks. I appreciate the answer.
You're good. Okay. Councillor Killick, you're up next.
Thank you, Mayor. To administration, I don't recall that we talked about what the remaining offsite levies would remain to be collected in the areas that we already say are serviced. For example, South Riel or Riverside, or even the Shro area, for example, is probably the largest chunk of land as it goes all the way out to Carrot Creek. And I think we're only into year 1 or 2 of that growth. So do we know what, I mean, it's a 20-year cycle to recover. Do we know a dollar value or even a rough estimate of what remains to be collected?
I don't have those numbers for you. I do know that the offsite levy program is based on a 25-year return on the investments. Mr. Fletcher?
Yeah, and in fact, our offsite levy specialist will be coming to council, I believe, in the next month to provide the update holistically on our current status and looking forward for the next year.
Okay, it would, I mean, it is a key driver that we want to keep that growth going in those areas so that we recover that offsite levy. That will be a helpful discussion to have for sure. The similar financial question is, one of the questions was the Northeast land, doing a financial impact analysis on that to even get a rough sense of all of the additional costs and kind of time of payback on that. Has that progressed or?
It has, Councillor. I would submit that is new information that wasn't part of the public hearing, and so it might be inappropriate of us to provide insight as to where it sits now. But yes, that work is ongoing and will be germane to any ensuing Northeast servicing discussion, certainly.
In the background, it says it's forthcoming. Do we have a rough timeline of forthcoming? Is kind of a nebulous term.
That will be based on some discussions we have later today, Councillor, based on my meeting on the 29th.
Okay.
For the Trump.
We're going in camera. Talk about
Okay, good. Thank you.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. So if this is not approved, and that basically would indicate that we wouldn't be recommending approval for any other areas in the north area, which would also really dampen anyone's enthusiasm about even putting forward an ASP in the north. How would we, how would the servicing occur to allow what's already been approved to be even developed for servicing? Because like I look at Jensen Lakes, they are basically were saying that we're gonna stop the development of Jensen Lakes for 30 years and stop the rest of the Erin Ridge North for 30 years. Is that the intention here?
Yeah, maybe I could start, Counselor, and please, I think if council determines that they're not going to approve that ASP today, the impetus for the long-term solution is not required now, right? And so ultimately it would be about sequencing the investment in the long-term Northeast servicing solution with the time that we see those lands coming online based on the absorption rate. In terms of what currently exists, right? So looking at interim capacity, and I'll use the word interim loosely because ideally you'd find a solution that, you know, ultimately contributed to the long-term capacity. Again, those discussions are ongoing. I can provide some additional context later.
Okay, I'm wondering if there actually has been discussion of if we actually do the recommendation of defeating it. I understand that there's discussions about how it would be expanded, but has there actually also been discussions about how these neighborhoods would be completed, or have we not just begun that?
Well, and I
discussion?
think you talked about Erin Ridge North, like the area structure plan in front of us, but Councillor Hughes rightly pointed out that Belcor's development is so closely integrated and it's approved. And to get the pipe in the ground for the servicing, we need certainty on development, which, so it's a chicken or an egg or a spiral. That's what you're trying, I think, getting at, Councillor.
I'm just wondering if they have alternate plans, or when we said we're not gonna recommend this, if we were like, but we were pretty confident that Jensen Lakes can still finish their development in the next 30 years.
There you go.
Or if the only servicing plan was the complete servicing area.
Through you, Mayor Heron. So one of the things that we're looking at through the ultimate servicing is the tie-in to this area structure plan. I think it's important to look at that together and holistically. There are challenges with bringing on some of the already approved lands that is already identified within their approved area structure plans as well. We are working with the land development industry to see, I don't know how much, please stop me if I'm going too far.
No.
But we've always been in contact with them about trying to maximize the development that they've got within their area structure plan with the existing servicing. At some point, if the servicing, there would be an opportunity if we come to an agreement about the servicing, and if council chooses to invest in the servicing, that if they should choose to refuse the area structure plan today, that there is an opportunity to bring back an area structure plan and talk a little bit more about phasing of infrastructure and developments to prioritize the areas that are already approved within existing area structure plans.
Yeah, so to your question, yes, there are discussions about if the long-term solution ends up being pushed out in terms of time as envisaged by the MDP, what could we do to enable the currently approved development today? Yes, we are having those discussions, Councillor.
Do we have, and I'm not asking for the solution, but like there's beyond discussions and there's also like, do we actually think there's a solution of stopping growth to the north, but still allowing what's been approved to be serviced?
No, there is not a 100% agreed upon solution yet.
Okay. The other question I had is how many other communities in this area or even anywhere are recommending to not approve area structure plans because we'd be growing in more than one direction? I just don't know. I don't know if anyone else is doing this.
Through you, Mayor Heron, I'm sorry, I don't have that information.
Okay.
At this time.
Okay. And the other thing about the MDP, I realize it's coming forward in April. When I look at the MDP, there's actually very little that specifically references this north. There's a priority areas, there's the map. it says it's still a growth area. So it still could be interpreted that it could be not a priority, but we've already made our priorities to move it forward, a growth area. I'm not seeing, and I'm looking forward to seeing this in April. I don't know if you're going to have an answer, but I don't see where there's a lot of changes to be made in this MDP for $800,000, when the majority of it would remain the same, the citywide policies, the urban structure, growth and principles. Those will all be consistent. There'd be very little in here that actually would just to simply accommodate the fact that we'd be growing in two directions. So I'm trying to figure out how we come up with $800,000. Just by changing it from saying a growth area would be allowed to be growing would before 30 years is up.
Through you, Mayor Herron. There are a lot of policies that talk specifically about priority growth areas, and they're pretty silent on non-priority growth areas. You're also then looking at bringing on a significant amount of land for development. So do we need to prioritize? Do we need to reevaluate that actually by bringing on the Northeast, maybe there are things within the West that will not grow as fast? So do we need to relook at the impacts now of, that's essentially what we're doing, is looking at the impacts of bringing on all of this land. And do we need to then either reprioritize or remove any kind of prioritization and just start putting in more and more policies regarding contiguous growth, sustainable growth? There's a lot to really look at. There is also a significant amount of land that is still enabled for development. That is one of the challenges that we're looking at as well, because by bringing on this parcel and servicing, that means that then servicing is even closer to these other areas. Will they want to come on board? How will we make those decisions and recommendations for the lands that are currently not planned? What do they need to have? So there, it's a little bit broader than just changing the map. Unfortunately, we do need to kind of have a full understanding about what bringing this all on will have an impact. It could also impact things like our infill rates as well. So we want to go back, take a look at it. That's at a holistic level. That's what we're looking at. Any other?
Because it sounds to me like when we approved the MDP, and then we said we're going to do an update to the MDP, that's what we should have done at that time, is fully updated the annexation lands, because we didn't include the annexation lands when we did the MDP. So we were told that we were updating the MDP, but it sounds like we didn't really update it. We just simply included the lands in the broader landscape, but never really considered them in our growth. And that this recommendation for MDP is actually what should have been happening a couple of years ago.
Well, I think, Councillor, to your point, the update was done, but the underlying principles and assumptions in terms of priority growth, all of that did not change with the addition of the lands. And so that doesn't change the priority sort of node-based or service-based focus of the growth. And so that's ultimately what would have to be re-examined and go back to first principles and determine the way ahead.
Okay. And I guess the thing I'm hearing is that you're looking at it like an either or, like it has to grow to the west or it has to grow to the north, and it can't grow in two different directions. But I'm watching Edmonton grow to the south and grow to the west, and I'm watching other areas grow in multiple directions, and they're not confounded by this. You have to grow in one direction only and then change and veer. So, but your premise for this is really that it has to be like an either or, and that if we were to gain in one area, it would be at a loss at another, and we couldn't possibly grow in both directions at the same time equally.
I'll just say that I don't think our staff is saying either or.
That's what it sounds like.
It's
So I'm asking
timing.
for
It's
clarification.
so we'll invest this direction and then later in that direction. And you asked earlier if there's other municipalities doing this. I don't know the answer to that, but I can tell you that many mayors that I talk to who are growing at 25% wish they were doing this.
Yeah, we're not growing at 25%. We're nowhere near
No,
that.
but
Yeah.
that growth that gets out of, I think if we go back to some of the conversations around Flourish, it was about creating a sustainable community and financially sustainable. But I mean, I'm not disagreeing with anything that it's said, but I think that the issue we're facing right now is everybody is maybe interpreting things a little bit different.
Yeah.
Staff are, council is, et cetera.
I agree. I mean, I guess the concern that when the MDP was approved in 2021, is the developers to the north said, we're very concerned this MDP is going to stop us from being able to grow. And then the response was, no, 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 that's okay. We'll do it case by case. First case comes forward and says, we don't recommend you do it. So it seems like their concerns were validated. And I'm just trying to figure out, like a lot of the statements that we're making here, like this is gonna be a lot of work and we never consider these lands. If we had them, we should have considered them, and we didn't do that for the update for the MDP. So, and I am hearing it's an either or in your mind, that we can't possibly grow in two directions at the same time equally. And I'm just looking for clarification if that's what you're saying or you're not saying.
Maybe I'll start, Christina, and then you go ahead. I think the way the MDP is currently written, based on the current assumptions and using service-based growth, it is sequenced, absolutely. If you tell us to do it otherwise, then we will enable another way of doing it, but it's going to have to involve going back to those first principles and determining, understanding the wider implications. Please go ahead.
So the way Flourish was written, did ask for us to prioritize to one area over other areas. We did look at growing to the north. We did look at growing to the west. We looked at infill specifically. We came up with this hybrid model, which is the greenfield to the west and infill is the other focus area. But we did leave opportunities for growth to happen in other areas. Part of it in, you know, again, hindsight is a very valuable tool, but was looking at if there were good arguments for or good rationale, whether it be planning, economic sustainability, environmental, to grow in another direction, that we would evaluate it. So we have evaluated it. There was also opportunity for developers to bring on different proposals as well. But essentially, when we reviewed this, we didn't get all of, I guess we didn't feel that there was enough justification to recommend to council that we approve this area structure plan at this time. If the growth rate changed, if a grant was given for infrastructure investment in the Northeast, if there was, you know, I don't know, any other thing that I could not predict or we could not predict as a planning group or as a city administration, we would look at those opportunities then. And that is why it wasn't a priority area, but it was an area for growth for other reasons. We also recognize that we did have some challenges with infrastructure. So there might be temporary solutions that might mean that portions of that land needed to be absorbed, maybe not all of it.
Mr. Walker, go ahead.
Thank you. I did just to supplement my colleague. I would just offer Councillor Hughes, at the end of the day, if administration, you know, we could change the color of the maps, we could add clarification to definitions, but be that as it may, there's still that $75 million price tag, regardless of the color of our map, regardless of the definitions. And I would just reiterate that is our underlying or one of our key underlying reasons for recommending that this is premature. It's not to do with the lack of a definition. We could change that definition. That price tag is still something that has to be reconciled. So I would just bring it back to that as opposed to, you know, maybe some gaps in clarification within the MDP.
Okay, so let me just understand this one thing though, because I appreciate that. And I thank you for the clarification. I understand now why you were saying what you said. I don't agree with it, but I understand it. So let's say that this doesn't pass. We still got $75 million price tag. And the problem I'm having is you're making the assumption that we're going to pay for it. We don't know who's going to pay for it. We don't know what the end result is, but because we're saying that the servicing hasn't been predetermined for financing, we're going to say recommend no. Now, how would anyone ever finance it if we can't get the land developed to pay for the payments? So our recommendation to say no to this isn't just that we can't pay for the servicing, it's also saying no. No one else can either, because no one else can get paid back when they make the loan. So I'm challenged by this. Because, and I don't know if there's a response, because your response is simply that we don't know the servicing plan. So therefore we should say no to the area structure plan. But at the same time, no one else is going to pay for that servicing if there's nobody to actually pay for the payments. And so this chicken and egg situation for justification basically means we're sterilizing the opportunity for Northeast servicing, period, regardless of who wants to pay for it. And so the justification to say we won't approve a development because we don't have the servicing already determined, I haven't heard that before. We approved other developments as well without having all the servicing predetermined. And yet this is a unique thing. So I hear what you're saying. I'm very concerned about your logic on this one. That's it. Let's go to the vote on this sucker.
And just to add on to that, I mean, the servicing is a big number. I think I asked this during the public hearing, but I'll ask it again. If it wasn't for the sewer line and on all the servicing up there, that's not the only financial impact that improving an area structure plan would have on the city and our operations. Because I know what Councillor Hughes is saying. You need approved area structure plans, you need certainty in development, so you can, like we did with Project 9, approve a big boring bylaw that we know is going to be served through offsite levies. That is what she's saying with the chicken and the egg. But I'm trying to get at, there's more than just the sewer line costs to an area structure plan development that is holding you back from making this a priority growth area over the west. Is that correct?
I mean, there are life cycle costs to a community, just as there are to anything, I think is simply put, right? And so absolutely there are operational costs that will be incurred once the community comes online. Again, we didn't talk about those numbers in the instance, so I don't want to delve into them at this point in time. And so there is the whole holistic sort of look at that. There's also, again, looking at offsite levies, the way offsite levies work, there's the return, but there's the offsite levy reserves that allow us to pay out over time, right? And so investment in one area can increase your reserves such that they mitigate short-term or medium-term costs to borrowing in another area, as an example. And certainly,
and I mean, this
right?
This is a residential area for the most part.
Yeah.
And the FIA on a residential area of this density is not positive. It never is. And we accept that as a municipal government, but that's sort of what I'm getting at. There's costs of the eventual bus servicing, the eventual fire support and that kind of stuff that it's very separate from the sewer line, right?
Absolutely.
That's what
true for any neighborhood. Absolutely,
Right.
Mayor.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Councillor Killick, you've been waiting. Go ahead.
Thank you. Just for clarification, if this doesn't go forward today, how soon can it come back? Are there regulatory kind of government rules that say it can't come back for another year or 2 years, or would it be driven by market changes?
Through the chair to Councillor Killick, through the MGA, it says that should a bylaw for an area structure plan be defeated, the municipality may impose a 6-month period. So it is a discretionary 6-month.
I'm fairly certain our policy is that the application cannot be made for 6 months.
6 months. Okay. No, I'm glad to hear that. It's not like can't bring it back for 5 years or something like that.
Could a council motion bring it back sooner?
I'm not able to answer that question right now. I'd have to look at the MJ wording specifically. I can look at that and get back to you all. if you like.
That's okay.
Yeah. And second question then, just we have approved ASPs for Jensen Lakes north on the west side of St. Albert Trail. That currently does not have any servicing going to it, correct? That piece of approved ASP does not have any servicing and nor any interim solution for it. So we're going to need something new for that piece. Likewise, we have an approved ASP for the very north piece of Aaron Ridge that has an approved ASP, but it still doesn't have any servicing capacity. is that still correct? I think we had it on map 5 on November 5th or something like that. I just wanted to clarify that.
That is correct.
So we have to find a solution for Jensen Lakes and Aaron Ridge to grow north within their existing ASP. The temporary solutions are not going to, whatever they may be, are not going to address that. It's Aaron Ridge, the southern port of Aaron Ridge North will maybe helped, and the west Jensen Lakes growing west are the only parts of established ASPs that would be helped by the temporary solution that we're somewhat reluctant to talk about. Is that correct?
Through the mayor, yes. But I would suggest that it's not, we have to come up with the servicing solution. This is private land development, and they have a responsibility to look at how to best service their lands. And then we will work with them to see if they work with our standards. So it's a collaborative approach. So if we is not just the city, yes. I think we've got some other comments.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. When you look back at the area structure plan, when those area structure plans were approved, I think 2009 was Aaron Ridge, 2014 was Jensen Lakes. They both have statements identifying limited servicing and a statement that says that servicing is not, I guess, a by right. It's not a foregone conclusion. So there has been awareness for a substantial amount of time. And to Ms. Peters' point, I think the presumption when we talk about whether it's a priority or non-priority area is priority for the city, and what council has informed staff has been priority direction may be different than priority for a developer, and there's the opportunity for developers to participate, which we have not seen yet.
That's a good clarification, because we've got so many moving pieces of servicing and long history that it's very important that we clarify what is city responsibility versus, coming up with a shared solution to address not only what we've got established ASPs for, but even if we eventually get to the new Northeast ASP that we're discussing today. Thank you.
Councillor Broadhead, you're up next. And then you, Councillor Jolly.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. It seems a little bit like deja vu, the same conversation we had.
Yeah.
But
okay.
it's interesting that we have ASPs and we say, well, it's not our responsibility to provide servicing. And yet the very largest argument against providing this ASP North is the large amount of servicing costs. So I don't know how that balances out. Fundamentally, my biggest opposition to what's the recommendation is you're putting up a big stop sign in St. Albert saying it's a moratorium on growth here. And if you want to grow, it's only in the west. And if you own land in the north, 30 years from now, that's what you're saying. And I don't know how we as a community say no to that. We want to grow, and it doesn't matter whether it's residential or industrial, there's a consequence to both, right? Yeah, I'd like to have light industrial because it brings more tax. It helps support residential. But if we don't have residential, then what are we? So. Questions. Fair enough.
Sorry.
Okay, no. How do you reconcile the requirement that you're making for big dollars for ASP North with what's happened in the past? I don't know if that's a question or not.
I think through you, Mayor Herron, I think the challenge from administration's perspective is we've approved a few of these area structure plans knowing that the servicing is they're constrained with their servicing. And we haven't seen any advancement with the addition, with the servicing and answering the questions. We've had lots of conversations and good discussions regarding it. I think that we've got a great working relationship with the land development community up there, and they've been receptive to this. However, it hasn't resulted in some permanent solutions. And the challenge with continuing to bring on especially additional lands at this stage is that now the problem continues on, and it continues on, especially when we know we've got capacity for growth already. So it's more of a, I understand the dilemma. I appreciate it. We are the Planning and Development Department. That I'm speaking from the Planning and Development Department right now. We're about growth and development, but we're trying to look at what is the best way to grow, and where, as a city administration, we're looking at it very much as a sustainability factor.
Good. Councillor Jolly.
Thank you, Mayor. My question is probably for you or possibly Ledge, but I'm wondering if we can delay this vote until we have that report that kind of gives the bigger picture in terms of staff capacity and priorities and that price tag to do the MDP update project if this were to go ahead.
So I can answer that question in a roundabout way. I can say that council has 2 years from first reading before first reading goes off the books. So nothing needs to happen today from that perspective. However, the public hearing's already been held and council cannot receive any new information that was not received at the public hearing. So the request I'm hearing is potentially for further new information before a decision is made, and I would advise against that. If that was the case, we would have to look at having another public hearing, and I'm not sure in terms of the logistics of how that would look at this moment without having the time to really think through that.
Could we, like, how much time would be required to think through that?
Well, there's a few things. There's Bill 20 that talks about not being able to have more than one public hearing on a matter. So we may need to look at things like changing the bylaw number and starting the process entirely over. It's really something novel that we haven't really had to consider yet. So it's not something that I would be able to answer today. I would need some time to think that through.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question.
Yeah, and I would say, although there's a charter coming on the MDP, it's not approved, right? So that could sit and wait depending on capacity and price tag, et cetera. Right. Any more questions? Oh, Councillor Bermansky, you're up next.
Thank you. To administration, in the preparation for developing Lakeview Business District, was there a consideration made of keeping those people living in St. Albert, and perhaps the business or the people that are working at those businesses with the number of people joining our city? We want them to have somewhere to live in the city as well. So should we not be focusing on residential parallel to industrial?
Through the mayor, yeah, this is a really important question, and something that we've definitely looked at. When we're bringing on Lakeview and the number of jobs, it definitely helps contribute to the overall goal of Flourish is bringing on, I think it's 13,000 jobs. Lakeview brings on a good portion of them. The Lakeview, or the St. Albert West Area Structure Plan, which is the greater plan, also has residential allocated within that. And so by bringing and approving that area structure plan, we've also brought on enough residential land to enable the, in our opinion, enough residential land to bring on enough housing for that workforce and for the needs over the next 25 years.
Okay, but people be forced to live in that specific area, then they couldn't have choice of the other end of St. Albert or whatever.
So right now we have several existing communities that are in the process of building out. We've got the Riverside community, we have Shiro, we have Northridge. There is still capacity within Aaron Ridge,
Nouveau.
Lakes,
Nouveau.
Nouveau, yeah, that's Northridge Phase 2.
Yeah, okay.
South Riel and Bilgeroo, Kingswood as well. So we've added all of that up, including the fact that we're anticipating that there will be some more what we call infill development to occur. We don't expect infill to answer all of our problems, but that combination, we feel we've got I think it's approximately 25,000 people that can be accommodated. So
Without the infill or with the infill?
that includes with infill.
Okay, and then my other question is with the EMRB approval that we have at this stage in time, say anything's postponed or, you know, brought forward at a later date, what happens to that approval?
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor. Nothing for the time being, and it's certainly the way things are going with EMRB. Don't expect it will be a factor should it have to be considered in the future. There's already been, I think, open letter request to the minister, right, to suspend the REF process.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Any more questions before I go and entertain a motion? Okay, so Councillor Killick did approach me and wanted to make a motion. I'll let you read your preference into the record.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, that bylaw 16/2024 be defeated,
Which is the staff recommendation.
which is the staff recommendation. Yes.
All right, I'll accept that. I'll let you have opening comments.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It seems that, as Councillor Broadhead said, it kind of like deja vu all over again. There were some excellent points brought forward, during our first reading, of what land we currently have available to use and service and is serviced. We also have a well-established, well thought out, well debated municipal development plan, Flourish, that shows clearly where we're growing. It lays out, and this is something very important. I think that it says this is the green light areas that we are going to. I've heard the term, you know, red light or stop sign in new areas, but in fact, by supporting administration's recommendation, it is saying this is a green light. This is the areas we are growing. They have been developed and lots of detail in the municipal development plans. But I went back and kind of looked at the tape, so to speak. We still have 8,000 room to accommodate 8,000 people in Shiro. It has just barely scratched the surface of its development. It can grow all the way to Carrot Creek. We're only on one side of the road there. It's barely started. Northridge, 1,300. Village Shiro, 1,100. Riverside, fully developed ASP down to, you know, we're starting to look at neighborhood plans and school sites and realignment of roads, upgrading to, you know, medium density. You know, we've got several activities on the go right there already. That area, Riverside, can accommodate 7,900. South Riel, same thing, fully serviced, ready to go, building out. And when you look at that, as Councillor Bermansky asked, it's nearly 26,000 people can be accommodated within land that we have ready to go, ASPs developed, servicing ready. And at our current growth rate, that's almost 20 years of growth. Even on kind of a worst case, if you will, it might even be 25 years. I think our ISL or one of our studies, I apologize, I can't remember who did it, but it was, you know, they used a growth rate of 1.6 and our actual growth rate is 1.3. So they were using more aggressive numbers and still said we had between 20 to 25 years of service land ready to go on basically on the west side. So while it may seem that we're saying no to northeast servicing, we're actually saying yes to our plan. And it's a well-developed plan. It has transportation studies, it has water, sewer, stormwater, it has parks, it has, you know, open spaces, it has a fire service out of fire hall number 3, it has community amenity site in that area, it has a school sites, not just one site, but it has multiple school sites, it has parks. So it's basically all ready to go. And if my fear is if we look at bringing on new land, any growth will be split between those two areas. And it will end up that investments that we've made already in servicing the land of the West will sit stranded because development would then possibly, there's only so much development to go around. There's only so much growth to go around. And it would go up to, could potentially go up to northeast. And my fear is that all of our investments that we've made in a plan could sit there stranded and could put the city taxpayers at risk of not recovering our offsite levies where we've already invested in that in those services. And that is a scary thought. If we don't get the growth where we've already got it planned, it puts the burden, potentially puts a big burden on ratepayers because there's only so much growth to go around. Even if we just find some magical way to do the servicing to northeast, it still puts a big risk and leaves all of that investment that we've made in the west, locations I've said, Shiro and Village-Giroux, etc. It puts those at risk. So even if we have a solution, I think the question was asked, well, what if we magically, you know, won the Lotto Max and got $70 million? I still buy my tickets, by the way, but you know, the problem does, then we still have growth magically going to a new area. It strands the investment that we've already made in these other communities and commitments we've made with other developers as well. So I've also heard concerns about reputational risk. I think it actually sends a clear message that we have a plan, the city has a plan, clearly articulated plan, and we are sticking to it. And we have a good, strong, solid reputation in that regard. I think there is much more I could say, but I'll probably save that for closing comments and listen to my other councillors.
Okay. Councillor Broadhead and then Councillor Jolly.
Well, I couldn't agree less. The simple fact of the matter is when the Flourish was presented to council, it didn't say, oh, by the way, we're going to put up a big stop sign and put a moratorium on any growth in this particular part of the city. Flourish just didn't consider all of St. Albert. And that is what it is. What I fundamentally have a disagreement with is that the unintended consequences of what we say to our development community, to to those who are coming to St. Albert, is that, you know, we're only going to grow at 1.3% per year, and that's just the way it is. As a matter of fact, I was talking to a developer here a couple of weeks ago, and he says, you know, back in the day with Genstar, they said, you know, St. Albert, we only like about 200 units per year, and we're fine with that. Don't get too carried away here. 1.3% growth in this is pitiful. And I think, quite honestly, that St. Albert has got the potential to do so much more than that. We can grow and we can service and our development community come along. We have a talented group of people who are not incapable of coming up with eloquent solutions to get us through this. The fact that we would say no and put a moratorium on growth is puzzling at best to me. What I think we should do is we should say there's growth opportunities in our province, in our country, and big things are happening, and we can be a part of that. And it doesn't all have to go to Airdrie. It doesn't all have to go to Beaumont. St. Albert can have its fair share of that growth too. And I fundamentally disagree with the idea that this is a like if you there's only so much growth to go around. So if you open this up, it's going to take away from that. It's not a zero-sum game. We can in fact grow bigger than 1.3%. And I am fundamentally in support of that. We need to be bold in going forward and say, St. Albert, we are a world-beating city. And we can take on the world, and we can invite people to come live because we're one of the best places to live in Canada. Come, be part of our community, grow. When people come, then the businesses will come with them. People come here and all of a sudden Lakeview Business District will say, holy mackerel, St. Albert is growing. Let's locate our business there too, because the labor market will be right next. And oh, by the way, you know, those who live in St. Albert, man, that's got a great quality of life in St. Albert. Wouldn't our employees really love to live in that community? But if we say no, we'll say, well, geez, you know what? Is it really? Or is it just for the elite? I say we open up our borders and we say we will allow growth to occur here, and we're going to facilitate that growth. And we're not going to put up a big stop sign and say you can't come. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Jolly.
Thank you. So Councillor Broadhead, it's rare that I disagree so strongly with you. Councillor Killick, great comments. I also agree that the strategies of the MDP are thoughtful, and that was because of an extensive process that many of us were involved with to make sure that that plan is of the highest quality. You know, when I was considering this vote today, the recent inquiry we got from a resident kind of concerned that they'd moved to Sherrow and all of a sudden his wife no longer had access to bus service really stood out to me when I was considering this. You know, we all know that there's no bus service in Sherrow because the population of that neighborhood doesn't yet kind of meet our threshold for expanding transit. And really the impact of failing to grow strategically is that these kind of issues are compounded. The quality for our residents declines. And like Councillor Killick mentioned, costs increase. We're seeing this in, you know, many of the communities, Councillor Broadhead, that you mentioned, you know, Airdrie, Beaumont, they're experiencing crippling rates of growth, where capital investment just can't keep up with increasing, can't keep up without increasing taxes in a way that hurts our residents. You know, when I think about our 10-year capital plan, you know, we need to grow strategically to make sure that we have the capacity to build a new swimming pool, to build a new fire hall, to provide those services to our residents. And by spreading ourselves too thin, I'm concerned that we just wouldn't be able to do that. So for that reason, I'm supportive of this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Mackay.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. It's not often, and I want to coach my conversations very carefully because I do care and I really take administration's recommendations very seriously. I know they're very well thought out. I know that they're you follow your processes and you really come from a strong place. So it really pains me a little when I have to go against them because I just feel that for St. Albert, your recommendation isn't the right decision at this time. I mean, I don't want to be in conflict with you, but I just want you to understand that when I make my comments, I think you guys have done a fantastic job in advocating strongly for the processes that we have in place. But you know, and the opening comments were very good. I can't disagree with them, but also I want to flip them a little bit because I honestly believe that you've identified a really good reason that we have continued to invest in our community. You continue to identify that we've spent quite a bit of time and dollars in our West, and that's what's made us attractive. And myself and Mayor Herron just came back from the International Conference on Shopping Centers where St. Albert had a booth, and the interest generated in that booth is a big part of what we have done as a council. You guys have done as administration, the community, the developers that are sitting here today bring to this community. I don't know how many times we were approached and said from everything like, how long are your permits? How long does it take? Does it take a week? Does it take a day? You know, they've identified without identifying communities. They've identified that some communities take 8 months, 8 months. So we are generating our policies driven by administration and council are generating a great deal of interest. And I, like Councillor Broadhead, see all of a sudden that this would trip us up. This could trip us up as we're seeing, because this does send a really mixed message. And I listened to the comments and the responses around it. It's not either or. And I listened to the comments. Well, I mean, we do have an MDP and I'm proud of Flourish, but we also have to remember that this kind of annexation came outside of it and the timing wasn't right. And maybe we should have potentially done a little bit more in relation to when we kind of merged the annexation to the the current MDP. But I mean, that's yet to all maybe come back to us in December or pardon me, April. So I mean, I'm even looking at the ASP and I'm going to take it word for word out of it. And it talks about facilitating incremental contiguous strategic development that will assist in addressing emerging city goals related to housing supply, non-residential tax assessment, and critical infrastructure necessary to enable the remaining build out of existing neighborhoods such as Erin Ridge and Jensen Lakes. And so, you know, we've done really strong advocating on our West. We've enabled those communities to grow, but we have to make sure that we don't do it at the risk of alienating existing communities, Jensen Lakes, Erin Ridge North, because we know that those developers have been in our community for a long time. Their products are good. There's continued interest in that area. So I could go on, but I really just can't support the motion. that's in front of us, but I did want to identify the fact that just pains me a great deal when I have to look against administration.
Counselor Hughes.
Thank you. The solution for the Northeast servicing is actually quite simple. We don't have the servicing for $75 million, but the biggest risk is we don't have people to pay the $75 million, whoever takes on that risk. So the simplest solution is actually to approve the development for all the affected lands. And once all the affected lands are approved, the risk goes away. Instead, the recommendation is to stop and then somehow get the ball rolling again in 25 or 30 years, assuming that the development community still has an appetite to want to trust in Alberta, which is the opposite of what we can be doing. The reality is that if we approve this today, we are not forcing development to happen today, tomorrow, or next year. The development will happen when the servicing is feasible. The developers will work amongst themselves and with the administration to figure out a solution for the servicing. So for example, Riverside was approved in 2010. It's still going on. They did not have to do everything right away. I looked at, there was a development that came forward, that there was that seniors development that became a condo development over in Erin Ridge, and they approved the they approved the ASP. They didn't do anything for 7 years. And then when they were ready, then they moved forward. So approving it today and saying, okay, well, you may not get the servicing completed for 10 years, doesn't say that they have to do it now. They can do it in 10 years. All we're saying is that the plan that they brought forward, how they laid out the land, they want to put schools, they want to put houses, they want to put commercial, this is how they're thinking about it. Do we agree with that? That's the real decision today, is here's the plan that we developed for this land. Here's how we want to move the dirt. Do we agree with how the dirt's being moved and where it's being placed? And what's going to be being put on that piece of dirt? That's the real question. Not whether or not we have a plan for servicing 75 million or whatever it ends up coming to at the moment this is coming for approval. So, as I've said, the real risk is how do we make those payments? And if we start saying you can't develop to the north, the risk just amplifies by millions, because who would take on that risk? If we simply said, we're going to let everything develop out and you guys can figure out the servicing and go forward once everything's developed, when you guys are the threshold and you say we have 75% developed, we think the risk has gone down, then that's when it'd be developed. But the current strategy right now is extremely flawed and it's extremely small thinking. The idea that 1.3% growth is acceptable is staggering. We are the slowest growing community in the capital region. And you can say, yeah, there's some that are growing at 25%. Well, that's not our biggest problem. Our biggest problem is, well, what if we grow at 2.5% as opposed to 1.5%? Okay, that would be fine. I haven't seen other communities say we have to develop in one area, and if we can't grow in the other area. That's very small thinking. And for this city to grow and become what we think it needs to become, we have to actually think large. And when this MDQ came forward in 2021, I don't think anybody interpreted that it meant it was a stop sign to the growth to the north. And when the developers came forward and said, we're interpreting this might be, and we assured them that would not be interpreted that way. So this is the time that now we actually say, do we agree with what we actually interpreted that MDP at the time of? That growth could still continue. Maybe we don't finance it. Maybe we have other statements before, but we are not saying we cannot allow it to happen. And that was really what we were telling people with that MDP. When we look at the MDP in general and say that it was well done, actually, I'm going to disagree at this moment because it did not consider the annexation lands. And when we said, what are you going to do about the MDP with the annexation? The statement was, don't worry, we'll update it right after. But then the update did not really include the potential for the annexation lands. So it really has not been done to include the annexation lands. And it was just simply a consequence of us doing both at the same time. So we have all this land that we've attributed, and we're actually saying, but we don't want to look at it for decades. And we've updated the MDP to reflect that without actually considering the potential of everything that we just annexed. And that annexation land has liabilities for us. We've got to pay to maintain it. We have to maintain all these other issues, we have bridges that fall down, et cetera. But our intention, according to the MDP, is that we're just going to let it sit there for 20, 30 years. And we're not going to do anything differently. So I actually think that this MDP update is overdue already. The other thing that we need to recognize is that this land was considered in the previous MDP to be a priority growth area. And then with this MDP, it became a lesser priority growth area. And so suddenly now it's become a non-priority growth area. if this doesn't get approved. And so reputationally, the developers need to understand that if we tell them that this area is going to be available for approval, that it doesn't change because a document decided to interpret it differently. That they make plans for 20 to 30 years. And when this came forward and the developers began developing this, it was considered a priority growth area. The MDP comes forward, or concerns were brought forward, they were assured, and now it's become a non-growth area. So from a reputational standpoint for St. Albert, we need to recognize that changing this and actually stopping development from occurring leaves us with a very bad image. And when you're trying to get growth or investment, the reputation of the city is really all you have, of whether or not people can believe that when they start, they can finish, and that they will be treated fairly throughout the entire process and equally throughout the entire process. So let me just see if I had anything else I really wanted to say. From what I can see, I think that everything that Councillor Broadhead and Councillor Mackay said was correct. Let's not limit our potentials today and decide that we have to have all the solutions before we can say that this development could occur. This will occur in due course, assuming that we can approve it. We are not forcing ourselves to approve the Northeast Servicing. We're not forcing ourselves to approve anything else. All we're simply saying is that when the servicing can happen and when the developer decides it's time for them to invest further, that we are going to allow that to happen. That's it. Thank you.
As you can see, there's a lot of passion up here today. Let me say, I agree with everybody. And honestly, everyone had some very valid and good points. I'll start off with saying that I am very happy that the third-party EMRB review validated our planning department's assessment. It does not align with our MDP. That's good to know that we have good planning staff that interpret the documents that we have approved in the right way. And your hands are tied, I think, in many ways to your recommendations to council because of our documents. Saying that, I saw Flourish very much like a tool that I could use when I'm making my decisions. We didn't have priority growth areas in the previous MDP. And now we do, because we were worried about how we were going to pay for growth, because growth is expensive. So I use it as a tool for when I'm going to decide to invest, I guess, outside of the norm. And I say the norm is residential development, which costs money, and I'm actually sort of comfortable with that. But when I'm making decisions on whether I'm going to put a pipe in the west or the east, I'm going to go west. Municipally supported is going to, that's why Lakeview, I think, was so overwhelmingly supported by this council. Councillor Hughes has pointed out a few times, and I agree with her wholeheartedly, that we need to decouple the servicing and the ASP, that we can absolutely, and I'm comfortable with having an ASP on the books that doesn't have servicing and doesn't grow, because we've done that in the past. And then the decisions come later on whether we're servicing a new pool or we're going to put a sewer line in. Those are kind of future decisions. So, and I don't see staff's recommendation, and I want to let you all know that I don't see it as putting a stop sign up in growth in St. Albert, and I don't see it as calling the Northeast a non-growth area. It's a future growth area. It's about timing. I believe the annexation lands were brought into Flourish that completely aligned with the priorities of Flourish. That's why it became future growth, not priority growth. And we all agreed to that. But at the same time, if you were to take this area structure plan and throw it over on the west, we haven't even talked about the merits of the area structure plan itself. Does it have the requirements for schools and parks? Does it, meet density targets, all those things? Like, it's a good area structure plan. So there's nothing wrong with that. So we're really all debating about whether it's west or east, and whether it's okay to have a approved area structure plan on our books, that could potentially not grow because it doesn't have servicing. And that's where my vote will come in, and I am comfortable with that. I'm just like Councillor Hughes said, I might not support any investment into the sewer capacity, et cetera, but I'm comfortable having that next phase of certainty for the Northeast, because it eventually will be a future growth area. And you know, if we can get some of the further north lands on the west side of St. Albert Trail developing, I think we all know what piece of land I'm talking about, north of Jensen Lakes. If there was some certainty there, then the financials look better for building. So this is just a step towards that. So much like Councillor Mackay, it hurts to say, I don't agree with your, actually, I'm not saying that. I do agree with your assessment that this does not align with the MDP, but I'm comfortable with having an area structure plan on the books at this point, whether it's serviced, whether we even have growth in that area for now. So Councillor Killick, I'll let you have your closing remarks.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Interesting to hear everybody's passion and comments. I still firmly believe that we're not saying that we're stopping or putting up a big red stop sign. We are saying yes to our current plan. Even if we were to grow to one of my colleagues' comments, even if we were to do 100% increase to our growth, if we were to double our historical growth, we still, which I would love to see, we still have enough land to do 10, maybe 15 years in the existing land that we have available. If we were to see it, and I would welcome that opportunity. Flourish has clearly laid out some really, in my mind, compelling reasons. Says we want to complete existing communities, grow where we already have the services and school sites and parks and trails and roads and bus stops. Let's complete those and have our growth fill up those areas and complete those existing communities. Says to develop expansion in an orderly fashion. That's exactly what we're talking about here. Orderly fashion. Let's complete Drew. Let's even get 3/4 of the way through Shiro. Let's complete Riverside. We've built a beautiful neighborhood there with banks and grocery stores and Tim Hortons, all good Canadian companies, co-op. Let's complete that in what we said in Flourish, to develop expansion in an orderly fashion. Let's minimize urban sprawl, all laid out in Flourish. And what we're going to do if it goes through, it means we're now going to have more urban sprawl into farmland over in the Northeast. The big one says optimize existing infrastructure. That is, in my mind, the key point. We've already invested in all the roads, the main roads. We've invested with our provincial partner millions of dollars and are going to continue to invest millions of dollars in Ray Gibbon to handle the growth. And sewer lines that we've borrowed money on. We really have to, in my mind, optimize that existing infrastructure and not jump across over and then get into a whole other discussion of, $75 million minimum, let alone all the, once we develop it, we're on the hook for fire service and bus service and snow clearing and grass cutting and park maintenance and, pothole repairs, all of the operational costs that come with expanding in a different direction could be devastating. I'm very concerned that I kept hearing today, you know, this could be 20 to 30 years before we look at that chunk of land. I don't know where that number came from. I heard it here today a couple of times. Certainly not in anything from administration. What I heard was very clear. If we grow faster, and like I said, let's even think it might be 100% or double, whatever. We can bring this back 5 years from now. The work is all done. It's all drafted. It's a good plan, as the mayor said. Administration would be bringing it back to us and saying, hey, we filled up all of those other lands much faster than what we thought. We're prepared to bring back a recommendation that says we now need to start looking at Northeast. We need to bring it on sooner. We start the plan back up, and we would have that well in advance of us potentially running out. So I really don't want to leave the comment of, you know, this is going to be 20 to 30 years. It could be 5, 6, 7, 8, who knows, based on, I don't have a crystal ball of what our growth will be, but let's say we keep continuing to attract businesses and residents to our wonderful city. And when we start to see that we're going to run out as normal course of business, then we'll start to look at bringing on new land. So as one of my council colleagues said, we need to start and let our developers know that they can finish. And that's exactly what we're saying here today. We've already started in a whole bunch of new neighborhoods, and let's finish them and then start looking to expand into the Northeast when we get to that point. We're not at that point now. We may be in a few years, but we'll be able to start that back up. But let's finish what we've already started. Thank you.
Call for the vote. Voting is closed. And that motion fails with Councillor Jolly and Councillor Killick in support. Okay, so bylaw has not been defeated. I'm gonna request, though, as we go into second, I know exactly what she's gonna bring the alternate motion for. Thank you. That we not redebate everything we've just debated. So go ahead, Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. That bylaw 16/2024 being adoption of Northeast St. Albert Area Structure Plan be read a second time.
All right, I'll accept that. Anything to say?
Let's just vote.
Oh, wow. Okay. Anyone else? Call for the vote. Voting's closed. And that motion passes with Mayor Herron, Councillor Bermansky, Councillor Broadhead, Councillor Hughes, and Councillor Mackay in favor. All right, go ahead, Councillor, if you want to do third reading?
Yep.
Okay.
That bylaw 16/2024 be read a third time.
Perfect. Anything further?
Let's vote before we change your mind. Let's go.
Call for the vote. Voting's closed. And that passes with the same people in favor. I'm not going to read them all over again. Okay. That takes us, is there any further business on this, Mr. Fletcher? Is there anything we need to talk about right now? We have an approved area structure plan with no capacity, so
No,
you're good.
Your
Okay.
worship, we're good.
There's no spiral effects that we have to figure out.
No, I think
Not today.
not today.
Okay, perfect. All right, we had no emergent items. I have a notice of motion from Councillor Broadhead. And I saw some BIRs. So the BIRs have to get read in? No, okay, just Councillor Broadhead. Go ahead.
I have an IR.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I said BIR. Okay, go ahead. I'll let Councillor Broadhead go and then you go. Yeah. Do you have
I
it?
can read mine if you want first.
Do you have it?
Go for it. Well, she was going to put it up on the screen because
Okay.
there's kind of a hybrid there.
It's a hybrid, is that what you said?
Well, sort of.
Okay.
The fact that we have two people pointing at computer screens may take a few more seconds.
Okay, why don't I go to you, Councillor Killick?
Thank you, Madam
Oh,
Mayor.
but there it is, sorry. Let's just get. Go ahead, Councillor Broadhead.
Okay, there's that one last line there around timing. So that administration prepare for council's consideration the following amendments to the land use bylaw 18/2024. An amendment to the table in section 26 of the Midtown District to conform equitably to the parking minimums adopted for other land use districts. Specifically, that minimum parking requirements of 1.5 stalls per dwelling unit, townhouse complex, and 1.0 stall per dwelling unit for any unit less than 5.18 meters in width be adopted. That an amendment to the Midtown District to include the same site density bonus section included in the high density residential district. And that there's a timing one around there. That administration scheduled the public hearing required of a motion to amend the land use bylaw for the April 1st, 2025 St. Albert City Council meeting.
All right.
When I sent that in there, I was getting a little
exactly.
carried away there. It's amend and amend.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead.
Mayor, can I just get clarification? So is the public hearing on the April 1st, or is it the motion to debate?
Motion has to be debated before we schedule a public hearing.
Right, so, but so the public hearing is not April 1st, right? The motion is for April
No,
1st? or?
motion's March 4th. 21 days.
Because I thought we had to give like 30 days notice to do a public hearing. So if it's March 4th and then it's April 3rd, that's not, first, I'm just doing math.
I think it's 3 weeks to advertise or something like that.
So the interpretation of this motion, this will be up for, this will be before council for debate on March 4th.
Yes.
If it passes, it directs administration to schedule the public hearing for April 1st. In terms of legislative timelines to advertise the public hearing, there would be sufficient time for that in between March 4th and April 1st, if the motion passed as drafted.
So would the first advertising be on March 5th?
It would be around the week of March 13th, and then there would be another advertising the following week.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
All right, and Councillor Killick?
Thank you. It's IR with respect to the recent change to 200 amp service. What would St. Albert have to do to implement this, and what are the pros and cons? If this initiated by the city, developers, or Fortis? Backgrounder is that 200 amp electrical service has been become the new standard effective May 1st, 2025 in the city of Edmonton, and it was initiated by EPCOR.
And there's just one more IR for Councillor Broadhead related to the legislative history
Oh,
of the.
procedure bylaw, wasn't there? Yeah.
Correct. We're just getting it up on the screen. There you go.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, information request, please provide the legislative history, including amendments to the City of St. Albert procedure bylaw from its inception to the current enacted bylaw 24/2022.
Okay. All right, we have an in-camera scheduled with Mr. Fletcher, so I need a motion to go in camera. And there is no motions coming out of in camera that I'm aware of, so everyone else can go home if this passes.
That council move in camera to have a confidential dialogue with the CAO pursuant to section 24(1)A and Freedom of Information Privacy Protection of Privacy Act.
Call for the vote. Hand vote, all those in favor. Councillor Jolly, so that is carried unanimously. All right, let's meet in council chambers, and I have co-hosts so I can end the meeting at the end of the day.